I've spent 15 years as a financial advisor at Golden Years Retirement Home, helping elderly residents manage their savings and investments. Trust isn't just a word in my profession, it's everything. So when I discovered that my sister-in-law Melissa had somehow accessed and drained the joint investment account I managed for 12 of our residents, I felt physically sick. The morning started like any other. I was reviewing monthly statements when I noticed the discrepancy: $200,000 gone, transferred to an unknown business account over 3 separate transactions. My hands shook as I dialed the bank, praying there was some mistake. There wasn't. The transfers were authorized using your secondary access codes, Mrs. Turner, the bank representative explained. By a Melissa Turner, my sister-in-law, my husband Mark's younger sister, the same woman who had been hanging around my office lately, asking seemingly innocent questions about my work, peering at my computer screen when she thought I wasn't looking. I sat in my car outside her newly opened boutique, Melissa's Luxury Lifestyle, staring at the gleaming storefront with its expensive displays and custom fixtures. Everything suddenly made horrible sense: her mysterious angel investor, the rapid renovation, the high-end inventory. She'd funded her dream with stolen money. Money that belonged to people like Mr. Peterson, who saved for 40 years to secure his retirement, or Mrs. Chen, a widow living on careful investments her husband left her. When I confronted Melissa, her response left me cold. "Oh, calm down," she laughed, arranging designer handbags on a shelf. "It's just an investment. These old people have plenty of money they're not using. My business will be successful, and I'll pay it back with interest. Everyone wins." "These old people trusted me with their life savings," I said, my voice shaking. "What you did isn't just theft, it's elder abuse. I have to report this." That's when she played her trump card. "I already told Mom what I did. She agrees it's a smart business move. Go ahead, try to make trouble. See who the family believes." My mother-in-law, Diana Turner, was a force of nature in our small town. A prominent real estate agent, president of the country club, and self-appointed family matriarch who believed her children could do no wrong. When I went to her house that evening, she was already prepared for me. "Now, Catherine," she said, sipping her ever-present glass of Chardonnay, "I understand you're upset, but you're overreacting. Melissa has a solid business plan. This is a much better use of that money than letting it sit in some account." "It's not my money to invest," I tried to explain. "These are my clients' savings, people depending on this money for their care." Diana waved her hand dismissively. "They're in a nursing home, dear. What do they need money for? Besides, family helps family. Melissa needed this opportunity." "It's theft," I insisted. "I have to report it." Her eyes turned cold. "If you do that, you'll destroy this family. Mark will never forgive you for ruining his sister's life. Is that what you want?" Mark, my husband of 12 years, the kind, gentle man who had always been putty in his mother's hands. When I told him that night, his response broke my heart. "Maybe Mom's right," he said hesitantly. "Melissa's business seems to be doing well, if she can pay it back quickly." I looked at my husband, really looked at him, and for the first time in our marriage, I didn't recognize him. "These people trusted me," I whispered. "Mrs. Chen skips meals sometimes to save money. Mr. Peterson needs new hearing aids, but has been waiting until his next investment return. How do I face them?" But I knew I wouldn't get through to him. Not with Diana's influence poisoning everything. For 2 weeks, I watched Melissa's boutique flourish while I made excuses to my clients about temporary system issues delaying their statements. I saw her posting photos of champagne celebrations and new inventory arrivals while I lay awake at night, sick with guilt and worry. Then the invitation arrived: Diana and Richard's 40th anniversary celebration, the biggest social event of the season, held at the country club, with over 200 guests invited. Diana had been planning it for months, determined to make it the perfect showcase of her perfect family. That's when I knew what I had to do. I spent the next week gathering evidence: bank records, transfer documentation, security camera footage of Melissa accessing my computer, and most importantly, statements showing exactly whose money she had taken. I made copies, organized them meticulously, and waited. The night of the anniversary party, the country club ballroom gleamed with crystal and silver. Diana held court in a designer gown, accepting congratulations and showing off her children. Mark in his tuxedo, Melissa in an expensive new dress, probably bought with stolen money. I watched them from my table, the weight of the documents in my evening bag growing heavier by the minute. At my table sat Mrs. Chin's daughter, who had no idea her mother's savings were funding those champagne towers. 2 tables over was Mr. Peterson's grandson, a local police officer who had helped me gather some of the evidence. Diana clinked her glass for attention. Welcome, everyone. Richard and I are so blessed to celebrate 40 years surrounded by our perfect family. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding but my voice steady. Speaking of family, I said clearly, I have an announcement to make about exactly how perfect this family is. Diana's smile froze. Melissa's face went pale. And Mark finally looked afraid, not of what I would say, but of what his sister had done. Sometimes destroying the illusion of perfection is the only way to save what really matters. The silence that followed my announcement hung thick in the perfect spring air. Someone dropped a dessert fork, and the clatter seemed to shatter the frozen moment. This is hardly the time or place, Barbara sputtered, her perfectly lined lips pressed into a thin smile. Sarah is obviously confused about some private financial matters. I pulled out a thick stack of papers from my envelope. Actually, I brought copies for everyone. Bank statements showing the systematic withdrawal of $50,000 from our account. Medical records detailing James' urgent need for surgery. And my personal favorite, I held up my phone, Ashley's Instagram posts from her luxury ballet resort, dated exactly when our account was drained. David, Ashley's husband, stood up abruptly. What's she talking about, Ashley? You told me that vacation was from your savings. The stress isn't good for the baby. Ashley wailed, her hands protectively cradling her belly. I can't believe you're doing this at my showers, Sarah. Stress? My laugh was bitter. Let's talk about stress, Ashley. Let's discuss how my husband can barely climb a flight of stairs because his surgery had to be delayed. The surgery we'd saved for, before you decided you needed a 5-star vacation and designer maternity wear. The gathered guests began to shift uncomfortably. Several pulled out their phones, no doubt fact-checking Ashley's social media against my claims. Barbara moved to stand between me and the crowd, her emergency damage control mode activated. Everyone please, she pleaded. This is clearly a misunderstanding. Ashley would never. Show them the doctor's letter, James, I interrupted. Show them what your mother and sister have been ignoring for months. James's hands trembled slightly as he pulled out his envelope. I knew how hard this was for him. The Matthews family didn't do public confrontations. They didn't air dirty laundry. They swept problems under expensive Persian rugs and pretended everything was perfect. Mom, he said softly, holding out the medical documents. My heart condition is getting worse. Without the surgery. His voice cracked. Barbara's perfect mask slipped for just a moment. Why didn't you tell me? We tried, I said, my voice tight with suppressed rage. Every Sunday dinner for months, but you were too busy planning the perfect nursery with Ashley, too excited about your first grandchild to notice your son couldn't breathe properly. I didn't know it was for surgery, Ashley suddenly shouted. I thought they were just being cheap, hoarding money while I needed things for the baby. Things? I gestured at the mountain of expensive gifts surrounding her, like the $1,200 stroller, the complete Gucci maternity collection, the week at a resort that cost more than most people's monthly salary. David was reading the bank statements now, his face darkening with each page. Ashley, these are multiple transfers. This wasn't a one-time thing. You systematically emptied their account. But we're family, Ashley wailed. Family helps family. Yes, I agreed quietly. Family does help family. Family notices when someone is sick. Family asks before taking. Family doesn't steal money meant for life-saving surgery. The carefully orchestrated baby shower had devolved into a theater of uncomfortable shifting and whispered conversations. Barbara's perfect event was crumbling, and I could see her desperately trying to salvage what remained of her family's reputation. Perhaps, she said tightly, we should continue this discussion inside. Away from witnesses, I finished. Away from people who might realize that the perfect Matthews family isn't so perfect after all. James reached for my hand, squeezing it gently, not to stop me this time, but in support. Something had shifted in him as he watched his sister's betrayal being exposed. The surgery, he announced, his voice stronger now, costs $50,000 after insurance. That's what we saved. That's what Ashley took. And now, He paused, taking a shaky breath. Now my condition has progressed to the point where the original procedure might not be enough. Ashley's tears had stopped. She sat frozen, one hand still on her belly, as the full impact of what she'd done finally seemed to hit her. I'll pay it back, she whispered. When? I asked. After the baby comes. After you buy everything on your luxury registry. After my husband's heart gives out. David stood up abruptly. I'll write a check right now. I had no idea. Ashley told me everything was from her savings. David, no. Ashley grabbed his arm. We need that money for the baby. The look he gave her was filled with disappointment and dawning realization. The baby needs their uncle alive more than they need designer onesies. Suddenly, James stumbled beside me, his hand clutching his chest. I grabbed him before he could fall, helping him to a chair. The party erupted into chaos. Should we call an ambulance? Is he okay? I can't believe Ashley would do this. Poor James. Barbara had sunk into a chair, her perfect posture crumbling. I saw her looking at James, really looking at him, perhaps for the first time in months. Seeing the pallor of his skin, the slight blue tinge to his lips, the way each breath seemed to take effort. My boy, she whispered, my baby boy. But it was too late for maternal concern now. Too late for the worry she should have shown months ago when we first tried to tell her about the diagnosis. As I held my husband, feeling his heart racing under my palm, I looked at my sister-in-law. She sat amid her expensive gifts and perfect decorations, finally facing the cost of her actions. The perfect baby shower was ruined. But maybe, just maybe, it would save my husband's life. In the distance, I could hear sirens approaching. Sometimes I thought the truth is the best gift you can give, even if it comes wrapped in chaos instead of perfect pink ribbon. The emergency room waiting area became an unlikely venue for the Matthews family reckoning. James was stable but being kept for observation, his heart episode a stark warning of how critical his condition had become. The pristine baby shower decorations felt like a lifetime ago, though it had been only hours. David sat in the corner, furiously making calls to his financial advisor. Barbara's perfectly applied makeup had long since surrendered to her tears. Ashley was notably absent. She claimed the stress was too much in her condition and had gone home. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I've managed to liquidate some investments, David announced, ending his last call. The money will be in your account by morning. All of it. He looked exhausted, the weight of his wife's betrayal visible in the slump of his shoulders. Thank you, I said quietly, but this isn't just about the money anymore. Barbara lifted her head. What do you mean? This is about patterns, I explained. Patterns of enabling, of excusing, of prioritizing appearances over reality. How many times has Ashley done something like this before, on a smaller scale? How many times have you all brushed it under the rug to keep the peace? The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, David spoke. She maxed out our credit cards last year. Aita covered it up. Took out a personal loan to pay it off. Didn't want anyone to know we were having financial problems. She borrowed my retirement fund 5 years ago, James added softly from his hospital bed. Said it was for a business opportunity. I never saw that money again. Barbara's face crumpled. I told him to let it go. Said it wasn't worth causing family drama over. And now my husband nearly died because everyone was too afraid to address Ashley's behavior. I said, my voice firm but not unkind. This has to stop. The doctor's arrival interrupted our conversation. After examining James, he confirmed what we'd feared. The delay in treatment had complicated his condition. The surgery would now be more complex, with a longer recovery time. Barbara listened to the doctor's explanation, each word seeming to age her by years. When he left, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. I did this, she whispered. I raised her to believe she was entitled to everything she wanted. I taught her that image was more important than integrity. And now, she looked at James. Now my son is paying the price. We all enabled her, David admitted. But that stops today. Over the next few hours, decisions were made. David would file for separation, pending Ashley's commitment to financial counseling and therapy. Barbara would step back from controlling the family narrative. And most importantly, James's surgery was scheduled for the following week. Ashley showed up the next morning, expecting everything to have blown over as it always had. Instead, she found her husband with divorce papers and her mother without excuses. But the baby, she stammered, reaching for her usual emotional leverage. We'll need a mother who understands consequences, David said firmly. Who understands that actions have repercussions. Who knows the difference between wants and needs. Mom. Ashley turned to Barbara, expecting the usual support. But Barbara stood her ground. No more, Ashley. No more enabling. No more excuses. You need help, and for the first time in your life, I'm going to be a proper mother and insist you get it. The weeks that followed were transformative. James's surgery was successful, though his recovery would take time. Ashley, faced with actual consequences for perhaps the first time in her life, agreed to intensive therapy and financial counseling. David maintained his boundaries but remained supportive of her efforts to change. Barbara surprised everyone by selling her oversized house, the venue of countless perfect family gatherings, and downsizing to a modest condo. I'm done with appearances, she declared. I want to focus on substance. 3 months later, we gather for a small dinner at my house. No fancy decorations, no pretense. Just family, working on healing both physical and emotional wounds. Ashley, showing signs of genuine change, brought a homemade dish instead of expensive takeout. Her baby bump was now visible under a simple cotton dress. No designer labels in sight. I've been doing a lot of work in therapy, she said during dinner. Understanding why I felt entitled to take what wasn't mine. Why I thought my wants were more important than anyone else's needs. I know sorry isn't enough, but I am sorry. Not just for taking the money, but for who I was. James reached across the table and squeezed her hand. That's all any of us can do, work on being better than who we were. Barbara raised her glass, a simple water glass, not the crystal stemware she once insisted upon. To growth, she said, to truth over appearances, to family, real family, not perfect family. As I looked around the table, at James's improving color, at Ashley's humbled but hopeful expression, at Barbara's genuine smile, at David's quiet strength, I realized that sometimes it takes a complete breakdown of the perfect facade to build something authentic in its place. The money that had nearly torn us apart had ultimately forced us to rebuild something stronger. A family based on truth rather than appearances, on accountability rather than enabling, on real love rather than perfect pretense. And that was worth more than any amount in any account. Later that night, as James and I lay in bed, he turned to me and said, "Thank you for being brave enough to shatter our perfect illusions. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is tell the hardest truth." I squeezed his hand, feeling his steady, strong heartbeat, and knew that while the truth had cost us a perfect family, it had given us back a real one instead.